So my name is Marco Kane Braunschweiler. I run digital here at the Museum of Contemporary Art Los Angeles, including the Screen program, which this is a part of. There's a lot of people on our team that worked on this, and I'm really psyched and proud for it to be here. So I'd like to thank Amanda Hunt, Nevin Kalpali, Sarah Stifler, Priyanka Fernando, Eva Seta, Jin San, Michelle Cho, Tracy Robinson, Mark Ayala, Kellyanne McMahon, and Evelyn Quijas. So this screening is organized by Program Director Alex Fiallo at Visual Aids and is curated by Erin Cristobal and Vivian Crockett. Yeah! I'm yelling a little too loud in the mic. Another big thank you goes to One Archives, who this is presented in collaboration with. So everybody, round for them. Without them, this also wouldn't have happened. This is the third time in recent years that MoCA has worked with Visual Aids for Day Without Art. Last year, we launched our online video program with, you know what, I'm gonna stop. A moment for the phones. Probably best housekeeping note, turn the phones off. So last year we launched our online video program, which is at moca.org screen. And we did that with the program from Visual Aids called Compulsive Practice. So that was just over a year ago, and I'm really pleased to be able to bring this back and have it physically in the space. That way we have an opportunity to talk. So with that short but illustrious digital tradition, all the films that you see here tonight will be able to be seen at moca.org/screen tomorrow through March 1. And since we got a lot of introductions today, I'm just going to introduce Alex Fiallo and Esther McGowan of Visual Aids so they can do their thing. Everybody, get excited.
Okay, we're passing the mic. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm Esther McGowan. I'm the Executive Director of Visual Aids.
And I'm Alex Fiallo. I'm the Programs Director at Visual Aids. Thank you for joining tonight for the Los Angeles premiere and the marquee screening finale of Alternate Endings, Radical Beginnings for Day Without Art 2017, Visual Aids' 28th annual Day Without Art.
Visual Aids is a New York-based arts organization that promotes HIV and AIDS awareness through the visual arts with exhibitions, publications, artist projects, and more, while supporting HIV-positive artists. And Day Without Art was Visual Aid's first public project, launched December 1, 1989, to coincide with the second annual World AIDS Day. And Day Without Art was conceived as a day of action and mourning in response to the AIDS crisis, and uses the power of art to bring international attention to the pandemic.
Though much has changed since then, we all know AIDS is very much not over. For tonight's video program, Alternate Endings, Radical Beginnings, curated by Erin Christovale and Vivian Crockett for Visual Aids, we've commissioned 7 new and innovative short videos from artists Mykki Blanco, Cheryl Dunye and Ellen Spiro, Reina Gossett, Thomas Allen Harris, LaBeija, Tiona Nekkia McClodden, and Brontez Purnell, prioritizing Black narratives within the ongoing AIDS epidemic. Video synopses about their work and a curatorial statement can be found in this evening's resource guide.
Visual Aids would especially like to thank Vivian Crockett and Erin Christovale for curating Day Without Art. And we would also like to thank the incredible artists for the time, creativity, and resources they contributed to the projects. Their dedication to developing new, ambitious works went far, far beyond what we ever imagined. We are also deeply grateful to the funders of Day Without Art 2017, the Shelley and Donald Rubin Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Arts.
So Day Without Art 2017, Alternate Endings, Radical Beginnings, has screened in 116 locations worldwide. Let's give a hand for that. Our widest reaching Day Without Art program in decades. 116 locations means the program showed in over 100 locations in the United States, and it's been translated into Turkish, Portuguese, and Japanese for programs as far as Istanbul, Turkey, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Tokyo, Japan. We screen the program in marquee screenings on World AIDS Day, December 1st at the Whitney Museum of American Art, Monday night in Harlem at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in collaboration with the Studio Museum in Harlem, and Tuesday night at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago. And tonight is our finale marquee screening. I want to thank Kyle Croft, project manager for Day Without Art, for his invaluable assistance coordinating these screenings nationwide and worldwide. I'd also like to thank Kaz Senju for his deft video editing and his expertise to make this compiled video program happen. Day Without Art 2017 would not be what it is this year without Kyle and Kaz. We also want to thank MoCA Los Angeles, particularly Marco Kane Braunschweiler, as well as One Archives at the USC Libraries and the One Archives Foundation, particularly David Evan Franz, for presenting tonight's Los Angeles screening.
Visual AIDS is a small nonprofit based in New York City, as many of you know, with a staff that has just recently grown to 5. Yes. Yet what we do is really the work of a much bigger organization because we do exhibitions, publications, and up to 30 public programs every year. We're growing our reach and creating more projects for national audiences, and that's part of a new 5-year strategic plan that we just started. So tonight's screening is one that we hope will be the beginning of many opportunities to build audiences and connections in Los Angeles with artists, activists, and communities working at the intersection of art, AIDS, and activism. We've done other events in LA in the last year or so. We did a artist member and friends party in February at the Wilding Cran Gallery. That was really wonderful. We did book launch events and a booth at the LA Art Book Fair. And tonight is another major public program in Los Angeles. We hope Day Without Art 2017 gives you a sense of what visual AIDS creates and the types of conversations and the context that we develop. And we feel strongly that Los Angeles is a really important place because of the many histories of HIV and AIDS activism and the LGBTQ community, and we want to make it a central place for our national attention. So please talk to us afterwards if you're interested in being involved at all going forward.
So after the films, Kia LaBeija will perform, and then we'll introduce Day Without Art artists Kia, Reina Gossett, and curators Erin, Christovale, and Vivian Crockett for what promises to be a great discussion. We hope you'll stick around for that, and I hope you enjoy Alternate Endings, Radical Beginnings. So now I want to turn it over to Erin and Vivian. I cannot say it enough. Thank you both so much for your thoughtful and rigorous curation of Day Without Art 2017. Alternate Endings, Radical Beginnings has brought visual AIDS as an organization and Day Without Art as a program to new levels, and for that, we're immensely proud and immensely grateful. So, Erin and Vivian.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Alternate Endings, Radical Beginnings, the 28th Annual Day Without Art, and our West Coast, aka Best Coast premiere.
Thank you guys for being here. It's been a year-long, well, it's been more than a year. We've been putting together this program for 16 months, so, you know, we had, I think, 2 babies, right, in that process? So yeah, it's been a year-long process, and the program tonight is really great. It features a range of artists, also a range of media from, you know, more documentary to experimental films. We were putting this together. We really wanted to think about an intergenerational conversation in that this was an epidemic that started in the 80s and still continues. But also we really wanted to center Black narratives because, you know, in the larger arcs of things, these narratives aren't told, aren't seen, and aren't prioritized.
We want to do a couple of thank yous before the film start, but we are anxious to get it started so you guys can see what we've cooked up here. We want to thank the artists and filmmakers again. And one of the joys of a long process like this is that we've really been able to build connections with these artists and people we've known before this project, but relationships have definitely been deepened by this and that we hope continue to grow. We also want to thank Visual Aids for the invitation to curate this project. It's been a really tremendous experience. Alex Fialho, thank you so much for your partnership and for all the things that you've done and the moments when we just could not do any more work. You've taken some of that work off of our plate, and we really, really appreciate what we've done together. We also wanted to thank Teresa Cremati, who designed our beautiful publication, which I hope some of you are able to get. We wanted to thank the Tacoma Action Collective, representing in the house tonight. Thank you so much for being here. They've been following this national tour, y'all. Hey. We also want to thank the MoCA team and the One Archives for partnering with us. And without further ado, do you have anything else you want to say?
I just have one question. Are y'all ready?
All right.
Okay, so now we're going to do some bios of our panelists, starting with Reina Gossett. Gossett often makes her art through collaboration. Along with Sasha Wurtzel, Gossett directed Happy Birthday, Marsha, about legendary performer and activist Marsha P. Johnson. Gossett is an editor of the anthology Trapdoor about trans art and cultural production, to be published by the New Museum and MIT Press, I think this month. Is that right, Reina? Yep, this month. A longtime community organizer, Gossett worked as the membership director of the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, Critical Resistance, Queers for Economic Justice, where she directed the Welfare Organizing Project and produced A Fabulous Attitude, documenting low-income LGBT New Yorkers. Gossett moderated Visual Aid's 2015 event, Aging Fiercely While Trans, and was a featured artist in Visual Aid's PlaySmart Safer Sex Kit project, exhibited and distributed at the Brooklyn Museum exhibition Agitprop. Gossett lives and works in New York City.
Let's give it up for Rena. LaBeija, who we just saw perform, is a contemporary artist who provokes awareness, acceptance, and activism for HIV/AIDS through her portraiture and performance art. Her work explores the intersections of community, politics, fine art, and activism. As a visual artist, she stages digital portraits as theatrical and cinematic reimaginings of non-fictional events to spark conversation, complicating the way we view her subjects and the spaces they occupy. LaBeija's portraiture utilizes the medium of storytelling to preserve histories and make socio-political commentaries on current events. LaBeija was a featured artist in Art AIDS America alongside Keith Haring, Annie Leibovitz, Nan Goldin, and Robert Mapplethorpe. She was the only woman of color, the only woman living with HIV, and the only artist born with HIV included in the exhibition. A performer by nature, LaBeija is a member of the iconic, she is the mother of the iconic House of LaBeija, and uses voguing as performance practice and community-based work. LaBeija lives and works in New York City.
Erin Cristobal is the assistant curator at the Hammer Museum. Is the assistant curator at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles. She's the curator of Black Radical Imagination with Amir George, which has screened both nationally and internationally in spaces such as MoMA PS1, MoCA Los Angeles, and the Museo Taller Jose Clemente Orozco. Exhibitions include Awake in the Water, Meditations on Disaster in 2014 at the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Arts, Memoirs of a Watermelon Woman, 2016, and A Subtle Likeness, also 2016, at the One National Gay and Lesbian Archives, and Selection, Democracy, Citizenship, Freedom, 2016, at the Los Angeles Municipal Art Gallery. She is currently organizing Made in LA, 2018, with Ann Elgood at the Hammer Museum.
Vivian Crockett is a New York-based independent researcher is a New York-based independent researcher, scholar, and curator focusing largely on art of African diasporas, Afro-Latinx diasporas, and Latin America at the varied intersections of race, gender, and queer theory. She is a PhD candidate in art history at Columbia University, whose dissertation examined artistic practices and discourses in Brazil in the 60s and 70s. Her scholarly and cultural work seeks to assert a radically political analysis of modern and contemporary art and to foster the remembrance and visioning of cultural spaces that merge a commitment to artistic and cultural production with socio-political justice and collective liberation. She is a 2017-2018 Mellon Museum Research Consortium Fellow in Media and Performance Art at the Museum of Modern Art. So without further ado, here are our panelists.
As an initial question, I wanted to ask you guys to speak a little bit about your films and the process behind making these films, and thinking specifically around the notion of place and space and the ways that your films are both engaging with New York City as a socio-political space that has real material, personal consequences for real people.
Hi, everyone. My film was really hard to make. It was really hard. I guess it was to the last minute of making it.
Girl.
Y'all know. But, you know, I kept thinking about something current, you know, what's something current that I can focus on? And I kept thinking about this reoccurring dream that I kept having about the apartment I lived in with my mom. My mom died when I was 14, and, you know, when I had to leave that space, it was so devastating. And I don't have that many memories of it. I have like one like really vivid memory of it, and that's it. And I keep having this dream that I'm back in the apartment, and sometimes we're packing up to leave, or sometimes my mom is there, or sometimes it never happened, or sometimes it did happen, and it's been driving me nuts. So luckily, my brother, who's an incredible archivist, had some incredible footage from literally since I was a baby. So when I saw the footage of my apartment, I was like, wow, I want to do something with this, and maybe in a way of stringing it together almost like a dream, maybe I'll stop having the dreams, or maybe I'll be able to figure out what it is or why I'm having the dream. So I actually went to the apartment to shoot some, and they wouldn't let me upstairs. And they knew who I was and everything, but they said, we can't let you go upstairs and we can't let you shoot. Yeah, but in that moment I realized that it's not my home anymore. And that home is not just about, you know, a building or an apartment or a space, but it's really about here. So I shot across the street from my apartment, and I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't go back anymore. And I haven't had the dream since.
Hey.
It's beautiful, and your performance was beautiful, and thank you for sharing it with all of us. For me, my film also was hard to make, and I was like, can I get an extension? Can I get another extension? Multiple extensions.
We're queering time here.
Queering time, it's just non-linear. So my film, was drew from this Lucille Clifton poem, Atlantis is a Sea of Bones. Is about huge violences that continue to haunt a landscape and whose traces and imprints we feel every day. Violences like the transatlantic slave trade, violences like HIV criminalization, violences like gentrification, and the policing of Black queer life, Black trans life in New York City on the pier. Which is one of the locations that we shot in. And so that poem had just been sitting with me for a really long time, and I had, at the time when I first came across it, it was this person, Alexis Pauline Gums, reading it online, and I was a community organizer working with Egypt LaBeija, who's the star of the film, and I was at the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, and Egypt was working at the Audre Lorde Project, and we were working on this campaign about access to welfare. For people who are living with AIDS, people who are low income, people who are disabled in New York City. And at the time, when many of us who were queer and trans would go in for welfare benefits, people working at the welfare office would say, like, no, come back when you look like a man, or no, come back when you look like a woman, right? We couldn't even get in the door to get the little bit of benefit that would allow us to survive. So that was a survival issue, and we had this really tremendous, huge campaign around it. And Egypt and I used to meet up, you know, kind of every couple of days in the building and study and speculate and kind of dream about what it'd be like to not have that kind of levels of discrimination when you go into the welfare office. And then one day, Egypt came in with this really amazing art coffee table book, and it was about you know, like life in the meatpacking district in the 90s. And Egypt was in it, and Egypt, you know, like opened it up and like showed me this just beautiful, fabulous photo of her, right? And she looked stunning, and she was going through it, and she was talking about, you know, she was turning the pages, and she was pointing out her friends, and she was saying, all my friends are dead. And this was in a moment, this was in the 90s, and this was in a moment when Egypt and I were both losing, you know, this is maybe like 7 years ago, when Egypt and I, like every few weeks, we would hear about a friend who was killed or died, and it was a very alive thing, right? We know that is still alive. And, you know, like I remember being here in LA in like 2013, and visiting MPA, who's in the audience, in Joshua Tree, and Egypt gave me a call and was like, you know, our friend Deja died. And so it was this kind of constant, constant death that we were holding, right? And constant violences that we're trying to figure out how to dismantle, how to survive, how to push through. And we just started dreaming, and ultimately, you know, like it became really hard to continue to do that kind of community organizing work for both of us. So Egypt started performing more, and I started to center an art practice, and that was what was really trying to keep both of us alive. I felt like we went through kind of a similar path about how do we stay alive in this moment, how do we continue to be fed, and how do we support a movement. And so the film was really about that, about how a person can kind of, you know, push a lot of those feelings of loss and grief down, right, and violence. And, you know, Jamal is a character who comes up out of the bathtub from the underworld, the otherworld, and is like here to wake Egypt up, here to remind Egypt that connecting to that grief, to that loss, is inextricably bound to her self-actualization, her power, her ability to perform and connect with an audience. And, you know, we just like dreamed up stories around that. And then Gio Weiss, who is a collaborator of mine and an artist on Happy Birthday Martian and the Personal Things, just provided this really, truly haunting score. Reach my time limit. I'm just gonna hand it over. This haunting score. So, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
So I wanted to talk about these motifs that kind of show up in both of your work, and thinking about water as this space of transcendence. You know, Kia, when you jump into the water, we're sort of transported back into that apartment. And when Egypt goes into the water, she comes out on the other end in this other world. And also how dance and movement sort of moves both of your pieces through. So can you guys sort of speak to how you were thinking about those landscapes?
Well, for me, the water really represented being in the womb, you know? So being back reconnected with, you know, your first home, because that's our first home. Everybody had that first home. And I think, you know, being in the womb was just like a way to kind of connect a lot of different elements. I'm also a Pisces, so I am water. And in terms of movement, I think for me, movement is just an incredibly healing tool. And so I think it's just interwoven in everything.
Yeah, that's so right. I'm a cancer baby, so yes. So water is really important to me. It's like this healing place, this place of also violence, right? If we're thinking about the transatlantic slave trade. You know, so much of life that I've had in New York was around water, whether it was like Free Speech or the piers, or, you know, just like being constantly around water. Water is like a way, as a gateway, you know, as a way to commune with spirit. So that was like a really important part of that too.
One thing that Erin and I were talking about today was the notion of kinship and family also moving through your work. I mean, your work, both of your work together in dialogue is a beautiful thing. We're really excited. We have like 200 questions and 20 minutes for Q&A. But if both of you can speak to kinship and family and how that shows up in your work and in your lives and in the other work that you do.
Well, I think it's quite interesting that LaBeijas are both in our film.
Okay.
But I think family is really important, whether it's, you know, your blood relatives or whether it's people that you choose to call your family. I think it's really all about having support and having love. And I think, you know, calling someone part of your family really means that they just really mean something very, very special to you. I have a lot of my family in the audience tonight. Shout out to them.
Call them out. Where they at?
My brother's here. Where's he at? My other mama Lola's here. Where's she at? My beautiful girlfriend's here. My best friend Daniel's here. He's my brother. Yeah, and of course, my visual aids family.
I mean, I think that's so right. It's, you know, Egypt is my family. Egypt and I have just traveled different and similar paths, you know, and we've been kind of dreaming about this film for a while. And, you know, I think also my work tries to engage the work that allows other work to happen and make that visible, right? So the work of the nobodies, the people who are like called and deemed to be not of value, to be nobody rather than a somebody, people who, you know, are not, you know, featured on the cover of a magazine or, you know, like whatever, but, and I think that is really important to me, like a family of nobodies, and like elevating that and making that really public and making that really present. And I certainly wouldn't be here without the life and labor of my family. And also family as a place of like constant contention and tension and harm and, you know, and real challenge. I think that is something, you know, like, so the Jamal character is here to, you know, like in the movie, Jamal and Egypt were family. They had like a real relationship, and it's ambiguous in the movie, but they were like really intimate. And so, you know, like Jamal is here to remind Egypt is here with a purpose. You know, Jamal is sent to really wake Egypt up and bring Egypt back into that that kind of principle, that kind of memory, and support Egypt to continue to live. And that's what, like, you know, a lot of family does. So.
Can we get a time check, Marco? We got time? All right. Well, we're going to open it up to the audience, and keeping in mind that we have like about 20 minutes for questions, so let's make them real good. And just, yeah. Who wants to go first? Yes. Hey, one of the filmmakers is here, Brontez Purnell.
When you feel like you're making a film, if this is a question that you can like answer or whatever, like how much are you devoted to like a narrative that someone could pick up and like read, as opposed to I'm trying to convey like this like nebulous like feeling or whatever? Like, do you need both those things? Do you toss one of them away? Like, how do you feel?
Oh my God, your film was so good. So funny. When I saw it, I was like, this is amazing. I think I pay attention more to feeling than anything else. And that's just a part of who I am, is I'm just a very, very feeling person. But But luckily, I was not alone. My partner, Tiona, worked on this with me, so she was able to help me kind of string in a narrative to remind people of like actually what was going on, or else I kind of probably would have just done exactly what I wanted to do and just been completely feeling, which is fine, which is also fine. But I think for the most part, I just try to go with my gut. I just try and go with my gut and just hope that people get it, and if they don't, then that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think feeling to me is so right. Like, I wanted people to feel that the things that haunt us also have a tremendous capacity to transform our world, right? If we face the kinds of hurts, if we face the kinds of traumas, if we face the kinds of violences that have really created the conditions that right now we live in that are truly unlivable, then they continue to haunt us whether we're facing them or not. To me, that was the feeling that I wanted people to have. And it's weird, like it's not really linear, and it's kind of like a dream, and sometimes I'm like, oh, is this too weird? Is anyone gonna get it? And other times I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I want. I want it to be for people to like take different kinds of things from it. So yeah.
Hey, thanks everyone. This is a beautiful panel, and it's really exciting. My question is actually specifically for Reina, because one of the things about your film that's so fascinating, also because we did the premiere at the Whitney Museum, is the idea of gentrification. You talk about the violence of gentrification, and maybe talk a little bit about the process with the Whitney Museum, with Egypt, and the filming, and what that was like with her being in the building that really represents the erasure of, her former life, of the people that had passed away, and looking at the peers. I think maybe because we're in LA, I'm not sure everyone maybe was seeing or understanding what was happening with the building and what that represents. So maybe if you can talk about that a little bit.
That's a great question. And other people feel free to chime in too. But so the Christopher Street Pier and the West Village and the Meatpacking District was a huge site of and a huge space for life for Black, trans, and gender nonconforming people, Black queer people, people who are disabled, who are HIV positive, people who are selling sex, people who are homeless. And over many years, and then really intensely over a few years, that life was cleared by the state, right? So the NYPD put up a lot of really enforced quality of life laws, or broken windows laws. So if people were like peeing on the street, or selling sex on the street, or sleeping on the street, that would be a reason to be arrested, right? For particular groups of people, like not the NYU students, but for everybody else, right, who was using that space. Not the residents who could afford a nice rent and a nice apartment in the West Village, but for the people who really made that space a place that people would want to live and inhabit, right? So Pride, for instance, like the Pride, comes from the Stonewall riots. Every year we commemorate Pride in June, like a particular kind of Pride. But before Pride, it was called Christopher Street Liberation Day, right? It was about Christopher Street. It was about the West Village and the kind of life that was there that was really a precondition, and the clearing and removal of it was a precondition for a building like the Whitney to exist in the first place, right? The Whitney couldn't exist without Black queer and trans life, Black HIV positive life, Black sex worker life being cleared. Being removed, and yet it exists anyway, right? Not just immaterially, not just the imprints and traces of it, but in a material way. People still hang out, people are still doing it, and it looks different, but it's still incredibly powerful. And so when we shot at the Whitney, we shot at two different spaces. We shot in Ridgewood at Dream House, and then we shot at the Whitney. It was really moving, right? One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is like when are people able to like look down at a space, right? Like that's a particular kind of privileged experience. And when you're in the Whitney and you're working there, or you could afford to pay a ticket fee, like you can look down all the time there, right? Or a certain group of people who are able to see can look down all the time there. And so to me, that was really like a powerful moment when Egypt was like, wow, I've never seen it from this particular view, a view where a lot of people are able to see it all the time who can afford to be there, or at the Standard Hotel, or, you know, like all of these places that are right next door. So for me, like that was part of Atlantic as a Sea of Bones, right? What are the huge violences that might have, you know, taken place a while ago, but continue to haunt and shape a landscape? And then, you know, it was a really powerful day. Egypt was crying. You know, Egypt, you know, was, you know, like it's real. You know, as someone who, you know, what used to be homeless, like going back to the neighborhood in Boston where like I was evicted from and I was homeless, and having it be completely transformed. You know, like I was like, wow, this is like, you know, I was feeling that experience when Egypt was talking about that experience. And it's wild, and yet we find ways to make life happen anyway. And I think that, you know, it's like, it's not just the horrible things that are happening to us, right? We're not just objects of state violence, we're also people who are subjects. We're verbing, right? We're making moves throughout all of these kinds of conditions. And we're doing it with laughter and humor, which is one of the reasons why I love your film, right? Like humor is such a powerful tool that is so often overlooked, right? And that was one of the things I really appreciated you naming in the panel, right? It's like humor is, especially when we're laughing at the state, or laughing, you know, at the, like, living our lives in humor-filled ways, right? Or I think about, you know, people who, like Marsha P. Johnson, who lived their life full of humor, also on Christopher Street, you know, but not to be the butt of anyone's joke. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you again all for this conversation, and Reina and Kia, fantastic work. I have a question for the curators, though, actually, if I could just, it kind of follows up what Reina was talking about, gentrification, and that has to do with your t-shirt, Stop Erasing Black People, right? One of the things I love about this program that we just saw is the opportunity you gave to Cheryl and Thomas to kind of go back and think about work that's actually been there in the archive in terms of Black and queer and feminist intervention and agency, really from the very beginning, right? I always like to tell people the very first text written about HIV/AIDS was by Samuel Delaney, you know? And it's rarely remembered how Black artists and activists have been present. And so thank you for that, but also what was that like? How did you, and how do you work to bridge the kind of contemporary crisis and the statistics from today, like 45%, and the things that really make us feel very, you know, depressed and disempowered, with this longer history that keeps getting erased, and then you're working to bring back to light.
Well, I mean, Thomas and Cheryl, first off, they're amazing. And, you know, their legacies in their own right. But, you know, what's interesting about their work is that they've always been working with the archive. So this isn't something that's new for them per se, but it's really something that helped contextualize the entirety of the program. So, you know, one of Cheryl's first films, seminal films, The Watermelon Woman, was all about this woman who was trying to, she worked in a video store, she was a filmmaker, she was trying to find this actress, this Black mammy character that kept showing up in all these race films. And, you know, of it, she kind of goes through this roaming archive and eventually sort of finds her story. But then at the end of the film, you realize that that was all made up. So, I mean, Cheryl's first film is just speaking to the erasure of Black folks, you know, more so within the entertainment industry. And then Thomas, I mean, he's been doing this work for years. Him and his brother, Lyle Ashton Harris, have always been invested in the archives, you know, kind of rooted in photography and filmmaking. And this was a really amazing sort of discovery for all of us when he told us that he made, he did this program called The 11th Hour, and he was a producer, and he basically documented the first day without art, which is a total coincidence. After we chose him, he told us that story. And so it was really beautiful to just sort of uncover that with him and like find that archive and bring it into the fore, see the young Kerry Washington acting her. I think that was her best role, honestly, y'all. I'm just gonna say it. That was her best one. But it was beautiful going through that process. And Cheryl worked with Ellen Spiro, who was the original filmmaker of Diana's Hair Ego, which was also a short that came out in the 90s. And so Cheryl and Ellen worked together to go back to that salon, and to talk to folks and to see where they are now. And so I just really loved in both of those films how they interspersed this archival footage, with the new footage. But, again, just like speaking to this archive that is here, that exists, but we have to search for it because it's not given to us ever. And also just to think about, the sort of lived or embodied archive. I mean, Kia, in your work, your connection with your mom and going back to that footage and that apartment and like that being a form of archive. And even, working with Egypt and like the legacy and the familial structure that you guys have and that being a form of archive. I think every film in this program really has some sort of archive in it that continues and evolves.
And then to speak to the Stop Erasing Black People, that is a shirt that emerged out of the activism of the Tacoma Action Collective, which Chris Jordan, who is here, was a part of. And so that was a really, really important intervention in really showcasing it's a deliberate whitewashing that has happened and continues to happen. I am an art historian. I've been doing a PhD for a while now. I've been doing, art historical study for a couple decades now, and I'm still young, but but I mean, it's just astounding how much effort it takes to erase these histories to the degree. It's so much work. And even thinking about, this tome of modern art, The Black Square by Malevich, which is about blackness. Like the joke of that painting, it emerges from the notion of a room of black people in the dark. And the fact that that isn't part of the conversation and abstraction and, all of this dialogue, it's like, it feels really important to consistently affirm that we've been here. It's not like we needed the resources to create this work and thank you so much. It's like we've been doing this. This is a way to spotlight that and to uplift those histories, but we've been doing this work. We've been doing it together. We've been doing it for each other. And thinking about the radical beginnings aspect of the title of our program, it's very much I was going to say rooted, but this is part of the notion of radical as connected to the roots, right? Angela Davis, radical is about getting to the roots of things, knowing that there are deep, deep roots to the work and to the histories that we're engaging with, and that there's a lot of new growth that can come out of that, I think all of us probably have had a house plant that's sitting there, is about to die, and then all of a sudden it sprouts a little green thing, and you're like, hey, boo, you were here all along. We have these enduring legacies, and there's all these things that aren't even here yet that are ready to sprout any day now with some water and some sun and some basic survival necessities that we have. We all need to be paid more for our labor all the time, please, thank you.
And I just wanted to give the mic to Chris for a second, just to speak to your action, because I feel like we've been talking about it, but you're here, so why don't you just say something real quick?
I really appreciate what you said, Vivian, about the intentionality behind the erasure, because it really does take so much work. And I just want to thank and honor all of the artists who've been a part of this program, because when we did that Die in Protest, we did it because we knew what was being stolen from us, and just to be able to come here and see this whole history being brought to the forefront, it just is life-changing. I thank you so much for that. Yeah, it was 2015. Me and Andrew Pham were walking through the Tacoma Art Museum for our AIDS America show that we were expecting to kind of like see ourselves reflected in this history. And I never go to that, I never go there. So it was like, oh my gosh, something relevant. And then we passed through, and then I passed through again, and I was like, something is wrong. And then I'm shaking, and then I go home and I just can't sleep. And I'm just looking up, I'm reading through the roster of the artists, and out of 107 artists that they've invited to present in this show, only 5 of them are Black. And so to know that Black Americans are over 40% of the death toll of HIV, and increasing numbers of the continued representation of who's affected, it was just like, I couldn't sleep. And so I immediately just started connecting with other organizers, attack organizers, which they do a lot of direct action work on a lot of different issues in Tacoma. And so we stole well, actually it started with an interview that's really important to read. If you can find the interview with the curator, Rock Hushka, he talks about, well, Black and Latinx histories are represented vicariously through white people. So that through the form of appropriation, there's a lot of appropriation art in the show. And so literally, like, when you talk about the intentionality and the depth, it's deep. Like, the mindset is really deep, and we have to, it's really about dismantling white supremacy. That's the only way that's the only way. So we just decided to, I want to say, I don't like to use the word appropriate when it's Black folks grabbing back stuff that's about us. It was, we reclaimed, we confiscated the shit. We had to just take it. So this cross is from the Our AIDS America cross. We took that cross and then put, the Stop Erasing Black People on it. But really it was the stories, Kia's story, talking about being the only woman of color in the exhibition, and as well as the way that so many of the Black artists in the show were mistreated. We knew we had to fight against it, and this is just the beginning, and I'm just so grateful for y'all, and we're looking for more ways to keep pushing, so thank you all.
All right, so one more question. Right there, yes. Oh wait, let's wait and get you the mic.
Hi, the film Diana's Hair Eagle, when it first came out, I happened to be at one of the first screenings in New York. And the thing that amazes me is that, I don't know if it came out in this short piece, that these women all did this because there was no money available. There was no money in that state because the powers that be would not accept any prevention and education money, because if you got it from the feds, you had to match it with state money. So they just simply refused to acknowledge that there was an AIDS crisis in their state. And what I want to say is that we used to have a lot of AIDS education and prevention money. There's none anymore. It's been somehow lost in the system. And this film showed what people can do if they know that there's a need. And they went out and they did it. They educated the women because they knew what the numbers really were. And I guess what I want to say is we're back to zero. Now, if there are people here that are familiar with where the money is hidden, that would be wonderful if you would do something good with it. But the communities of color have always been under. They've never really gotten the money that they should be getting because their numbers have always been higher than the rest of the population, and it's still happening, and it is just a national disgrace. Thank you for your work. You're all doing beautifully to get the word out. And that's about it. It's more of a statement than a question. Continue to do what you're doing because it's needed now more than ever before. Please.
Thank you, Trish.
So thank you, everyone. We just wanted to thank MoCA for inviting us here. Thank you to Visual Aids, who has supported this entire program. And of course, thank you to the filmmakers who blessed us with your work.